Hey everybody, my name's Diane Gibbs and I'm the host of Design Recharge, and I'm here with my friend Jodi Miller, and this is episode 391. We're so close to 400. This is great. This is the second time Jodi's been on. If you are searching, you want to see the one before, if you get the newsletter, there was a link to it, but it's also in this episode as well. There's a link to her last episode as well. So, but this time Jodi has pivoted. She's full force on, and this is a great way for us to be able to talk about two things. We're talking about that pivot. Also, like, I really feel like you did a fearless move, which Jodi and I had started meeting, I guess in January, maybe?
January 3rd.
January 3rd. No skipping out in the first week of January with me. So Jodi and I started meeting, and we meet weekly. And from January, the plan was for Jodi to stop her job. She had a part-time job, and she was going to stop that in May of 2022. Right?
Yeah. Well, initially we weren't even talking about me quitting my job. It evolved into that after a few weeks of meeting.
Okay, so set the stage for them. So to kind of give you an idea, and this is, I called this overcoming fear with faith and action, because one of the things that Jodi has always done is she puts steps in, she takes action, which I think is really great. And I love that about Jodi, because she's willing to kind of do the uncomfortable thing. And I find that really inspiring to me. So, a little bit of background. You've worked as a textile designer, right? Mm-hmm. And that was kind of our last one. We talked about that, plus these environments. You've been an experiential designer. And now you really are being led to just being painting and doing paintings. So more fine art, right?
Yes. Yep. That's right. So to go back to when I was on last, that was February of whatever year it was. And it was later that month, after we had talked about all these exciting, like, experiential things that I was and am still very passionate about, but I had been creating them and kind of facilitating them, and it just seeing the fruit of it was really exciting. But it was literally later that month, I went to a conference, and I really felt, it was through my church, and I felt like God was like, you need to lay that down, which completely surprised me.
What does that mean? What does that mean? Okay. Lay that down for somebody who isn't okay. Go ahead.
So to say, I just felt like I needed to step away from that role, because I was leading the creatives at my church, and I was leading them, kind of empowering them to create these creative experiences outside the church. Mm-hmm. Which was really fun. And, but I felt like God was saying, it's time to let someone else step in and do that. And he really showed me too, I want you to focus on your family. And little did I know what I would be facing, some really difficult things, but, the difficult things in my family kind of started then. So it was really a blessing for me to be really focused and doing something different that I knew was greater. Although the last time we talked, and all those experiential things and leading creatives, I thought that was the thing. I mean, I really felt like, oh my gosh, I have arrived and this is the thing. And when God showed me, actually, I need your kids to be your focus, full on focus right now, and trust that I've got somebody else to step in to take over. So I had been, I think almost a year, I had not been leading creatives. I had not been doing those experiential things. And I felt too that I wasn't contributing financially, really. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, maybe I should do a part-time job, because I'm used to being kind of busy. And
And your kids are older, so it's
my
not
kids
like
are older. They're teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
And so while they were at school, I was like, maybe I should find a part-time job. And I talked to my husband, and he was like, oh yeah, maybe we can, be on the lookout for it. And it was literally like, we went to coffee, had that conversation, and I came home and I had like a job description. We're looking for someone at my church. And I was like, oh, maybe I could do that part-time and still feel connected, because I was leading and I was so involved before, still feel connected. But then, school's out, I'm home, and then I can just be focused at home. And that was in November of 2019.
Okay.
That's when I started. And so, but as I was working there, I really was missing the creative part of it. Like, my job was an administration, pastoral administrator, admin there, which I loved. And I loved like helping people be able to walk out what they felt like was their call in their life. And
but maybe did you also feel like there was some of your gifts weren't being used?
Yeah, I mean, I had opportunities there to be creative, but it was more like I'd come home and I would take over the living room, and I would, while we're all hanging out as a family, I'm like painting, and everybody's having to walk around my table in the middle of the living room. And I loved working at River House at the church. It was like super rewarding and super fun, and to be around creative and powerful people. Like, it was super fun. Then in April, I decided to take a weekend, a Friday off, like my first like weekend off. And I did this conference, and it was an art conference, and it was online, and it really was done really well. And it was like everything they were saying was like, oh my gosh, they're totally speaking my language. They talked about like bringing people into an experience, and they were doing techniques that I didn't know how to do. So I felt like I was learning something new. It was just really inspiring. And then they offered this 52-week online mastery program. And like, I just felt really excited about the thought of it. And they were like, it probably requires like 20 plus hours a week. And I was like, well, I'm only working 20 hours at the office, so maybe I could do that. And so I signed up, and you pay for it monthly, and you take these classes, every month. And I signed up in September of 2020, and it was November. And so September, October, November, and I was still in week 3. I was not.
So
I was not getting through it.
So some of it sounds like that maybe you needed accountability, and there is like a community with that, but you weren't involved in that, right? Not yet, at least.
No.
In the courses, or so it's just on you to get the things done. They had a plan, but sometimes we need help, even in doing something that we really want to do, and that we're investing time and money, but always we take a backseat to the family or to other things. Right. And sometimes it's that some of your gifts get put in the back burner. And obviously we all have to make sacrifices. I'm not saying like throw it all out, who cares about your family? That's absolutely not what I'm probably. My mom's like, yeah, Diane, that's you. You hadn't been home since Christmas last year. But I know, Mom, I appreciate it. But in this time, so from September to November, you had gotten through 3 weeks of work, and 20 hours a week isn't really feasible for you with the schedule that you have, right?
Yes, right.
So oftentimes we also have this really big idea of what we can do, but it doesn't, because we're really hopeful, right? We're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be able to do this. I'm going to spend 2 hours doing this. And one of the things we've uncovered is when Jodi goes and she paints outside somewhere else, like not in her house, and there is a clear end, like she has 3 hours to paint, she can end a project. It is not a problem, right? You know that it has to be done at the end of this time. But when she's working on it at home, that's one of your hurdles, right? Is that it's the finishing. Is this done? I can't finish this. I don't want to mess this up. Right.
Right. Yeah. I read what you entitled our talk, Overcoming Fear with Faith. And I was like, oh man, I'm going to have to be really vulnerable, because you're kind, and one of your greatest strengths is reminding the people that are able to meet with you, reminding them of their successes. But, like, so you would remind me of like, oh, you stepped in faith and did this, and you stepped in faith and did this. Meanwhile, I'm like in my studio with projects that I'm having a hard time finishing because I'm being confronted with a fear of like, oh, what if I mess it up? What if I've wasted the time I've spent on it up to this point? What if then I've wasted the materials? Or
this isn't just a game. This is something you're taking super serious. And a lot of these are commissions that you don't want to mess up.
Right. What if I've wasted the client's time and I have to start over? It's not like digital art where I can just erase it and start over a couple steps back. Like, yeah. So I saw your title and I was like, oh, okay. I'm going to have to be really honest about like fears that are still coming up that I know I'm having to like face and overcome.
Oh, that's all of us. We all have things, and some things are forever. It will always be something. For me, mine is like fear of rejection. You know, I want to be nice. I want people to like me, but sometimes I have to hold the line with you or with anybody that I'm working with and say, hey, but you said this. You said this was important. Is this still important to you? It's hard to say that, right? It's hard to do that because I know you love me. We've been friends for a long, long time. But when you started painting, so you've been painting as a textile designer, you would paint in Photoshop. I mean, this is not new. You have extreme artistic talent to me, I think. And then, but you didn't always use traditional mediums, right? You might be comfortable with a few mediums, but one of the things that this course has allowed you to do, not my course, this is like through Milan
Art Institute,
is that they are teaching you different kinds and they're taking you back. And one of the things in the very early, now, I mean, if you see Jodi's work, you would be like, no way, she's bad at that. But she felt like she was bad at color, or she didn't have a good idea. So the color portion was really, it was harder. And we're all going to have things like that other people think what we're doing is fine, but it's not where we want it to be.
Right.
Yes.
And I think one of my core values is wanting to be excellent at what I do. And I think, like meeting with you, that striving for excellence. You're constantly reminding me, like, I don't need to be perfect. Like I can show up and fail. And I'm still, the fact that I showed up is what's excellent. So,
Right. Well, and sometimes when you're in that hole and all you can see is that it's not enough, it's not what you wanted it to be, you can't see, oh, hey, but look at all these other things that you've done. These could be backdrops, or these could be, but what was so interesting to me is that one of the things that we worked on, or we have worked on, or are working on, is that Jodi is that whole thing about she could go to church and do 2 services and finish a painting, maybe in the first service, or maybe it's 2, or she would, and this is a time crunch. This is very fast. So she has a clear idea of what she's doing, but she knows it's finished when the service is over. She's not going to keep piddling with it, right? She had to finish it. And so she's done this. She does other things. She went for a day and painted these people dancing. She went to the dance studio and painted and drew a ton of things, right? And it was just very productive. One, she wasn't being distracted by other people in her family, right? But so sometimes it's just other tactics that other people just suggest, and you have to be willing to try. But it's also seeing where there were successes. And for you, when you went out of your house and you had a time constraint that you had to be done, And I think about this when you were at, I don't know if I think it was Tommy Bahama. They would say, oh, we're going to go in a different direction. And you never were like, oh my gosh, I have to start over. You always were like, awesome, I get to make something else. Like it was
True.
such a great attitude. Like I wish I had that attitude at times. But sometimes it was seen as an opportunity. But and it happens to me, like I think about how some sketchbooks that I probably have down here are just filled with X's, like things that I thought were just terrible. And I X through them because they were so terrible, like I can't even see why this was ever good. And I just scratched through it. Right. There was nothing that I found really quickly in this one, but there are times, but then I also am like, oh, wow. I look at them months later and I'm like, these aren't so bad, but I know that I was so hard on myself at that moment that it's painful to even look at it or to be in the sheet next to it. I don't know if everybody deals with stuff like that, but I know I deal with it. It's not as good as I thought is what I was wanting it to be, but it's not that bad if you look at it in another way. And I think when you're doing things live, you're doing it with other people around. Oftentimes people will come up to you and say, hey, can I buy that? Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're not sure it's done, but you guess it's done because they want to buy it.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
So, when you start, like, how would somebody go about, how did you start taking commissions? Was it just that you were doing these things at church or you were doing these things out and people saw them and then they, because I think a lot of people are like, I don't even know where to begin if I was going to pivot into this other thing. How do you show your work? Or, is that, I know Brian White's here, he paints, but he has a whole nother separate Brian White art on, a different Instagram that he does that. And Brian, you can put that in the chat. But like, how do people, if this was not just a side project, this was a complete pivot for you.
Yeah.
And so where did you feel like it was about painting? Was it just in taking those classes from Milan or?
No, I mean, long before we even had our last recharge, I was dreaming. I had a series of dreams where in the dreams, I'm painting and most of them were portraits. I've never painted portraits before. So and it was a series, there were like 7 to 10 where I in my dream, I'm mixing colors, I'm painting the portraits, I'm finishing them. I can see them. Like I could see them so clearly. And it started with one and it was during the time I was doing beautiful words and each painting had one word attached to it. And then it was like over a series of months and I felt like, oh my gosh, I have all these paintings. And then I felt the weight of like, oh, I'm like stewarding something, like I'm carrying something that I can see, but somehow I need to get it out. And in all my years of like creating and designing at Tommy Bahama or anywhere that I've worked, any opportunity, like we did a lot of work on the computer, but usually that had to be the finishing tool. At Tommy Bahama, they never wanted anything to look digital, to look like it was done on the computer. So a lot of what we created was by hand first, and then you would take it into the computer and finish it that way. But when Luciano, who was the creative director, when he saw a surface design, a textile design, he wanted it to look as if it was hand done. He did not want to see any computer in it at all. Mm-hmm. Though he knew the process, like he knew we were like manipulating color and creating repeats and everything in the computer. So any opportunity that I had at work when I painted, it was like, oh my gosh, I love to paint so much. And a lot of my job, wasn't sitting and painting. A lot of it was, but a lot of it wasn't. A lot of it was on the computer or different ways of concepting and stuff like that, where I wasn't painting. But anytime I painted, it just was like, oh my gosh, this is the funnest I love to, but I didn't feel like that's necessarily where my strongest skills were, but I just knew this is when I feel most alive, is when I'm painting.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So then when I started dreaming about painting and I would sit down and paint, even if I wasn't, I didn't feel like I was able to paint what I had seen in the dreams.
Mm-hmm.
But even when I sat down to paint, I would just have that same feeling like, oh my gosh, this, I feel the most alive in my spirit when I'm painting. And so then, not feeling like I had the skill to actually paint these portraits, I just was constantly carrying them in my heart. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, like nobody's ever going to see what I can see if I don't figure out how to paint them. And it was during a church at worship that I attempted to do one of the portraits, and it turned out okay. I don't have it in here. It turned out okay, but it wasn't like, I was like, it's okay.
You knew you were still missing something, some sort of skill. So then you started searching for somewhere to fill that skill need because you still wanted to get these out. You felt like there was a purpose for them to come out. Yeah.
Well, I was following an artist online who paints portraits all the time. And even though the images I have in my head, the style looks completely different from hers, I was like, gosh, she knows how to paint portraits. And it was actually her and her mom that did that conference. So that's why I signed up for the conference, because I'm like, well, she can teach me something. Like, she paints portraits, multiple ones a week. So, and she's really good at it. I'm going to learn some skills. And then when I did the conference and they were talking a lot about what we talked about last time, just like how creatives create experiences that bring people into a better understanding of who they are, and the creating beauty and creating joy through your art. Like, it was like all the things that are in my heart. So I just was really excited. And when they talked about the mastery program and how it's like this college level course, and you're going to learn oils and charcoal, which I had not ever really been trained in, and then mixed media, which I played around with, but I mean, I've never taken any courses on it, and finding your voice and building a portfolio and marketing. And then, after the year, having the skill set to be a professional full-time artist, when they were offering that, I just felt like I was being invited into it. And I had to decide, like, okay, is this something that I really want to do? So, and it, it's a financial commitment too. So that was part of it. This wasn't going to be a side thing. Or if it was, like, I had to be pretty committed to it. So.
Okay. So then that was in September. In November, you were like, this is not good. I'm 3 months in and I'm only got 3 weeks of work in. But then you also had this year has been a huge change year. You started changing your body as well. My mom's like, her body, probably. It's not like she's doing, I don't know, implant. She has tennis balls in her back or something. Nothing like that. But so because this is big. This is, you're working 20 hours a week at part-time. But this is what you really feel like you are called to do full-time. And this was some of our conversations that we had. I was like, so if this is, because what would happen is these are things you can solve. You can do the things at work. You can do those things. You can meet those needs. But by doing those, you're not doing what you're really called to do. If you were supposed to be a full-time mom or a half-time mom, you can't half-time mom. But if you were called to do something or you felt that way, it's like this other thing was just sort of in the way, because it wouldn't, you would make that a priority instead of this. You wouldn't hold your time for the painting or the drawings, or any of us maybe might do that. I know I do that. Like, it's easier just to do something for a client than it is for me to work on my own business, because it's harder. It's harder to do that work, or the learning to sit down and commit to those things. So, but you also started changing your body. What was your body like before? And then what were you changing?
Well, it's in the last like 4 years, I would say probably 3 summers ago was 4 summers ago, I injured my back. And the whole summer, my back was out. Like if the family was going on a bike ride, I couldn't go. Some days I couldn't get out of bed. Like I was in a lot of pain. And thankfully, by fall, like it wasn't as bad. Then the next summer, we went for a walk, and I told Casey after our first walk, summer walk, I was like, my sciatic is hurting. And he was like, really? And then it was within days. And I was like laid out on the bed, couldn't move. It was actually really scary. And God totally did a miracle. But I still had that summer, I still had a lot of sciatic pain, and that kind of slowed me down. And I wasn't able to like really engage in what everybody else was doing at home in the summer, which is kind of a bummer, but I wasn't in as much pain as I had been that 1 week. And then the following summers, I would always be kind of timid and baby my back quite a bit. And and if I did spend a good amount of time trying to do the courses, the lessons, I'd be in my studio and I would go to bed in pain, which kind of like also was another fear that was brought up. Like, okay, I want to do this, but what if my body can't handle it? What if like I can't get it done? And because my body's too tired at night, or it's in pain or whatever. So, that was pretty discouraging for me, but, there just seemed to be quite a few things that I committed to, okay, what if I could paint full time? And what if I could actually get the skills I need to paint these portraits that I've been carrying for so long? And it was in November. It was in, November. It was in November that I wrote in my journal, and I prayed and asked God to help me see his dream for me. And what are the things I need to have in place? Like, that's what I wrote. And it was literally 2 days later, a friend called me and left a message. And she said, Jodi, I think you're in the middle. And she said that the middle is the hardest place to be, because you start losing sight of where you're going, and you start losing touch with where you've been. And so I just started, this is before you and I started meeting. It was the November before. And I just started, okay, what do I need to have in place? Where does my vision need to be? Like, how do I see where I've been, but where I'm headed? And then it was literally like a week later, the end of November, where I call it the deconstructing. It's like it's where my pastor would say, where we let go of our gift projections, like the misconceptions of what our dream is, and letting go of our own self desires that we've woven into his promises for us, and where disappointment has maybe taken root because you're not where you thought you would be, and you're not sure where you're headed. And I just really prayed for discernment, and I prayed for someone that could be on my side. And I wrote in my journal, I wrote it down. I prayed for a fellow encourager who would help me define and own my lane. Like, what's my lane? And I prayed for a fellow visioneer who could help me see with faith the tomorrow that has been ordained for me. I needed a pioneer of hope who could encourage me to hope again, because I was discouraged. See why
she's so good with words too? Oh, I love it. Keep going.
Well, I was discouraged that I wasn't getting done the classes that I so wanted to do. And I was discouraged because I didn't feel like my body could do it, even if I could get my mind to do it. And then because I was working at the church, my pastor had like been gone for a while. He came back and he started preaching about vivid vision, and he had the staff.
What is it called? What did you say?
Vivid vision.
Okay. Yeah.
And and he had written like a 3-year plan for our church, and our church is really young. He's really young. So like, he had spent time with God and was like, okay, God, where could our church be in 3 years? And at work, he was asking everybody to do the same thing. Like, where do you want to be in 3 years from now? And I brought home what is this called again?
Well, it's an ikigai.
Ikigai, right. So the executive pastor had created this ikigai for everybody on staff. And because I was the support person, it wasn't as imperative that I had mine filled out for work. But I remember you and I had started meeting then. So yeah, my pastor started that in December. God was like, maybe you should reach out to Diane. And I remember I texted you and I was like, so, you know, the coaching thing that you do? And you were like, do you have somebody that's interested? And I was like, me? Like, I just need someone who can, be that fellow visioneer that can see it with me and help me pioneer what the next steps are so that I can really hope again about being able to do it. And then it was right at the same time that, you know, I brought home my empty ikigai. And when I showed it to you, you were like, you should totally fill it out. Like that's your homework, like fill it out. And I filled it out and it was like, what does the world need? What are you good at? What do you love? And where is God leading you? And it was really through this vivid vision that you and I remember us meeting that day. And I was so excited because you were like, Jodi, this is what you're called to do. And it was then that you were like, you are not going to be able to be at that job very much longer. And I was like, what? And you were like, yep, no, for you to do this, you have to step away from, because you were able to see some of you could see my blind spots, you know, like you could see like, Jodi, even if you're trying to protect your Thursday, Friday, Saturday to focus on your lessons, you're still getting phone calls and emails from work that take you away. And because, like you said, it's sometimes easier to say, oh, and it was easier for me because I knew like, oh, I'm good at that. I know how to do it.
It's fast. It's easy. It doesn't push you, right? It's not uncomfortable.
Yeah. I'm not going to fail at that. I can just stop and do it. But what I was finding was I was doing more of that, not just with work, but home, like being the rescuer at home in ways that I shouldn't have been. You called me out on that too, like in such a loving way. Like you really were my answer to that prayer, because you were someone who not only has been a voice of encouragement, but you've also been someone who's been able to instruct me and give me feedback with courageous love. Like you've been able, Jodi, don't you want your kids to know how to do that? Like, I'm like, yes, like you don't want your son to marry somebody and not know how to do that. Like, I just needed to be reminded, like, it was almost like I was using I can be the rescuer. So I didn't have to be obedient to what I was really being called to do. And so we had filled this out and I was like, no, I can do both. I can, if I can really focus, I can do my 20 hours at the office and I can do 20 plus hours. I can do this. And you were like, well, we can revisit it in a couple months, but yeah, you're not going to be there for very long. And
so you had it out of May of 2022 when your son graduates from high school. That was when you were going to,
well, I did come back. I did come back and say, okay, maybe I could be done in May 2022. When he graduates, then I could quit at work. But then you and I met again, it probably was the next week. We met again and we were tackling fears. Mm-hmm. And this fear of like, have I been like the fear of wasting time and money and resources to do something that might not be anything at all. How do I even know it's anything? And I knew more because I was here, because we had gotten to this place. And I was like, oh my gosh, that really does all look like it is something that I'm supposed to be doing. And you would say that is what you're supposed to be doing. It was encouraging, but I got to this place where we were talking about that story of the orphan boy.
Tell them that story.
Okay. So the orphan boy, these nuns, it's the holiday season, it's Christmas, and they've created the feast back at the orphanage for all their kids, all their family, this huge feast, and they find this orphan boy. So they bring him to go into the feast to eat. But he's got these ragged, worn clothes, dirty clothes. And for him to go in, they want to give him new clothes. They want to change his clothes. And they can't change his clothes because he won't pull his hands apart. And they can't get his old clothes off. And when they finally pry his hand open, he has a moldy piece of bread. And I remember I was sharing this with you, and I started to cry then because it was hitting a chord. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think this job that I keep holding on to is my piece of bread. That because from the very beginning, I felt like, oh my gosh, I think God wants me, I'm called into ministry. And I've always just thought, oh, that means it's in the church. And that's why it was so exciting when I was leading the creatives at our church and we were doing such dynamic and impactful things, because I was like, this is it. This is my bread. And then working at the office, I think I felt like, well, I can do this, but when it's time for me to live out my call, I'll already be here. It'll be easy transition. And I was realizing in that moment, oh, God has a feast for me. It's this. He has a feast for me that has it. What we discovered really doesn't have that much of a role inside the church. It's more outside the church. And that's the feast. And I need to let go. And we wrapped it up. And I think I went back to work and shared that same story with my coworker, the children's director, and I started telling her, and then I broke. It was almost hysterical crying. And she was like, oh, okay, I think you really need to talk about that with God and with Casey. And it was right before spring break. It was in March. And I went home and told Casey, and then we went on spring break. So I wasn't at work for a week. And we got to go to McCall, which is a little mountain town. And we were there with the kids, and it was super fun. And at the end of the stay, Casey said, I prayed about it and I don't feel like I've heard the audible voice of God at all or gotten a download from him. But every time I pray about you quitting, I have total peace. So if on Tuesday you want to go back and let them know, then I'm okay with it. And you and I hadn't been able to meet for a couple of weeks because I was on spring break. So you didn't even have a clue, but I was so excited that the next Tuesday when I went to work, before work, I texted my bosses and said, can we meet today? And I went in and told them and then I moved the timeline up to May 2021. When, I said, I can give you however many weeks, March to May. It was quite a few, but I was like, I can be here until May 20th, but then I need to be done to do this. And then when we met and I told you, you won't believe what I did. And it was also that week that I had decided to do this Optimum Health program, where my goal wasn't to lose a bunch of weight. I had met with a friend and she did this health assessment with me. And she had said, you're going to sleep better. You're going to have more energy, which I needed more energy to just do what I was being called to do. You're going to have more energy. You're going to have, it's going to be good for you. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I started it. And within 2 weeks, I was sleeping through the night. I had way more energy. I went back to work after the first week, and the same friend, the children's director, was like, you're acting like you're on drugs. You like have so much energy. I was like, I do.
One of the things with this program, the eating part, is there was no sugar, right? You cut
no sugar.
It was a keto focus or not a keto focus?
No, it's different. It's like a mild ketosis. You're eating a lot of protein, but you're eating carbs, and you're eating
more smaller meals more regularly.
Yeah,
right?
Smaller
like 6
meals
times a day.
Yes, 6 times a day, every 2 to 3 hours, drinking a ton of water. They're all protein based meals, and but no sugar. And within a week, like it was recalibrating like my metabolism, and like I was like, oh my gosh, I'm sleeping through the night. What I didn't anticipate, which has been like one of the best things, is that it was cutting out inflammation in me. So like I had been waking up, my feet and my ankles hurting, my joints and my hands hurting. And I was like, oh, that just must be getting older. That must be what that is. And within like a week and a half, I remember waking up and being like, oh my gosh, I have no pain in my hands. My feet don't hurt, which was a plus. Plus, then I did start losing weight pretty quickly. And so then I had to go back and be like, I think I need to set a goal, because it's not going to be that hard for me to lose weight, which I wasn't really concerned about or anticipating. But yeah, so since March.
But it was also, you and I were also talking about like what time you got started. You had to get the kids out, and
right.
There was so much, and it was like Jodi couldn't really get started until about 10:30.
Yeah.
After starting this, she was up early because she was hungry, and she she was able to get up and get moving and get going. Yeah. So helped you, just your body was recalculating or resetting itself so that you were able, it wasn't like a 4 hour in the morning to get reset or get on your way, which I think that was a really good thing that you weren't even expecting. Because I remember you were like, I'm waking up because I'm hungry.
Right. It's so true. My body's like, oh my gosh, get in the kitchen and eat and start your day. Yeah. Which is a huge benefit. My day starts way earlier. And and I've lost almost 40 pounds. I mean, I've hit my goal. I'm not going to be losing any more weight, but like I have no back pain. This whole summer before it got smoky and yucky, we were going on bike rides, and we would be riding all day, and I was with everybody doing it. I had way more energy. I wasn't having to take naps in the afternoon. I could do the 90-minute sprints a couple times, and
which are the classes we were trying to set a class and then the homework in a 90-minute block so that you would have some focus time. So again, all of it's kind of working together, and it was really, I mean, as I saw just Jodi just getting smaller and smaller, but her energy was there. So it was really pretty amazing. And at some point you get to eat regular food. You're incorporating regular food. Because
the meals are prepackaged.
Right.
They're called fuelings, and you can do it with whole foods too. I chose to do it just to make it easy for myself. But now, because I'm in maintenance, like I'm maintaining, and then now adding in more activity. Now I eat whole food, but no sugar. And I eat a lot of fruits, tons of vegetables, and like a lot of protein throughout the day. So then
what's it like now if you're standing up and you're painting, or like in a church service, if you're having to paint through 2 church services, is there pain for you now? Or are there ways that you are, I don't know, working through that? Or is that not an issue at all?
It's not an issue. It's so weird to be able to even just sit on the floor and bounce up. Like to not be worried, like, oh my gosh, am I going to be in pain? Or so pain isn't an issue, which was a total game changer. It was like, then it makes it, when your body feels like it's capable, then it definitely makes you feel like, okay, I can actually do this now. And I didn't realize how much of me feeling like I couldn't do it was tied to how my body was feeling. So yeah, so that's been a big thing for sure.
I do think it's all connected. How if we're not getting enough rest, if we're not getting refueling is not just food. I think it's about time together, time alone. However, I know Paul's here. Paul's like my lunch is part of my refuel, not just eating, right? But it's also just of what he's putting in his mind or how he's connecting with other people during lunch. And I think that we have to know when we have to know when our kind of downtime is, and then we have to be able to adjust. So I want to ask you about some things, and we'll kind of skip around a little bit, but what have been some of the things that have been challenging that you've seen yourself embrace that more, and then maybe things that are still challenging, but what are some, and how have you worked through some of those things? Like I had written like color, you were space challenged. That sounds like we were like talking about Mars or something, but it was like, it was physically your space, like this studio that you're in right here. That was a big challenge. And you set aside a good bit of time to fix that challenge, right?
Yeah. The body was a challenge. Overcoming pain in my body was a challenge. And then, and then you had me take a week. What can I get done to make my space more conducive to living out this dream? And I mean, it took me longer than a week to figure it out because it seemed overwhelming. I had a little tiny corner in the sunroom where there was a piano and a credenza and chairs, and there was a lot of furniture in here. And so I had one little tiny corner, and we talked about like, well, maybe we should build one of those she shed studios in the backyard. And I felt too like, oh my gosh, I'm getting distracted by, oh, the kids need this. And, but then we were watching, it was late at night, we were watching like a thunderstorm, and Casey, we were sitting in the dark in the sunroom watching the lightning. And he was like, this room is the size that we would build out in the backyard. What if we just like made this your studio, like really committed and made it your studio? Then you were like, okay, take a week. But it meant like moving the piano, which is up a step and over, and which seemed huge because it's so heavy, and like moving rooms downstairs and moving things up here and getting rid of furniture. Like it seemed a little overwhelming. And then Casey sat down with me and made a plan, and then we just knocked it out. It took a week, but like now this is 12 by 16 space. We built an easel that's the size of this wall, and we found things on Facebook Marketplace for super cheap, and I spray painted them to match. And like, this is my space, and it's awesome. So yeah, so I've been able to overcome that. And then
the other thing was your studio before, your computer and stuff was downstairs, and you had other craft things in this one room, right? Mm-hmm. And then you had this space, which was really split. So now your space is together. But one thing that was really important to Jodi was that she didn't want to be like disconnected from her family during, so when her kids came home, she didn't want them to have to go and see her in this other room. So here it's open floor, so she can see them in the den or the where their family room table is. So she still felt like she was part of it. And that was one of the things that we worked at, so that some of it was just space, and some of it was like, oh, Diane, I didn't get everything moved. I didn't. And I was like, I think you're trying to move like a whole lot of stuff in a week, and it's not going to happen. You need to give yourself a little bit of a grace period, right? So again, super hopeful. She wants to get it done really quick, but it's not really practical with everything that's going on. So, and you sold pieces of furniture. There was a lot of kind of, so I think one of the things I want people to do is, you may have this vision, but it can't be done in a week. And I'm sure my mom is thinking, exactly, Diane, why do you think you can do everything in a week? But I think that a lot of us have that. It's like, once you get the vision of what you are supposed to be doing, you think that we should be doing it tomorrow. And I think that there's a period of time. We don't just jump on a bike and learn how to ride a bike in a day. I mean, I didn't. It took a little bit. You do training wheels, and I just think we need to give ourselves a little bit of. I'm talking to myself here as well because it's hard. It's hard to do that. What other things challenged? Like we've talked about what to charge, the ability to finish, iterating. I mean, you might want to tell them about that. Like that's a solution to worrying that you're going to mess something up. Do you want to tell them?
Yeah. So to that, I've found that if I paint multiples of the same thing, then I'm able to choose from, I'm doing a commissioned portrait for someone of their granddaughter, and I painted 6 of them. I threw 2 of them away, and I didn't feel like, oh, that's such a waste, because I had 4 of them that like any of these 4 could work. This one looks the most like the granddaughter. That's the one that I'm going to focus on, but now I can practice on the other ones. It just kind of created some freedom, and which it made it a lot more fun too. And the charging, what to charge, that was a big one that you helped me like overcome a wrong mindset, an unhealthy mindset about my value, and how that was tied into me not being able to come up with a fee to charge for my artwork. And I just feel like I have a better sense of what my value is and the value of the art that I'm creating. So that's been really good. It's still awkward and hard, but then I'm always surprised, like, oh, yeah, they're fine. They're fine with what I just told them. So that's a blessing. And then the color, I still feel like that. I mean, that's always going to be a challenge because there are some colors I can't see, which I really allow to be a fear. But it's almost like I'm competing with myself in the studio. Like every brushstroke needs to be a different color. And so like the bird that's hanging back there, I did it live. It seems like I'm able to test out these theories when I'm doing it live because I give myself a little bit of a break. I mean, I only have 30 minutes. There's a bunch of people. Like if it's not great, I have an excuse, I guess. But the bird there, like every time I took the brush up to the canvas, I put a different color down. And just trying to create some kind of breakthrough so that I'm not intimidated by the fact that like some reds look gray to me. Some greens look like the gray red, so and not look at that as something that's limiting my art, but like you're like, that could be your superpower. So, just trusting in that. And there's a lot of mindsets that you and I have been able to establish that are way more healthy than the ones that I've had before.
Like what would be something that is a practical one that if one of your kids was having that issue that you could kind of bring some of that mindset work that you've had to struggle with, but now have overcome? What do you have an example?
Yes. When we did the mindset reboot with Mario and his group, I can't remember the name of the gal who was the speaker, but I remember what she said. And she was talking about the vision version of yourself, which tied right into all of the like habit forming that I was doing with food, and where you take your current reality, or I guess your current reality and what that is, defining it, and then defining what your desirable outcome, your desirable reality to be, your vision version of yourself. And then that structural tension, what are the base things that you have to do every day to get you to that vision version of yourself? And if you're constantly focused on the vision version of yourself and less focused on, oh, my current reality is this and this and this, that like the current reality might be what's true. The vision version of yourself is your truth. So like, if you can focus on your truth, then you're constantly working towards it. Like every success and every failure is getting you to your truth. And I think like with my kids, I'm able to say, okay, you're challenged with this right now, but how do you see yourself when you're overcoming that? Like, what does that version of yourself look like? What are some things that you can do in the tension of not, being in between? What are those things that you can do every day that are going to get you closer to your vision version of yourself?
So one of the questions I had written was how you have embraced these risks and you've leaned heavily on your faith, but then there are times where obviously that's really hard. It's that middle. I love that your friend called it that middle. What have you done to remind yourself of that purpose? So anybody could use this kind of technique or something like this. Like or anybody can answer this question is, what are you doing to remind yourself, especially in those low times or maybe daily, to remind yourself of that purpose of, do you know what I'm asking? So this is the new path and this is right. Because a lot of times we'll be like, oh, I could just go back to the church. I could just go be an admin again. It's easier. Like there's a lot of like unknowns, and there's a lot of, oh my gosh, can I really do this? Right?
Yeah. Yes. We talked about it maybe even the last time that we met, about me defining my why and creating even like pieces of artwork that I can have around me that remind me of that why and remind me of the vision that I have. And I feel like I spend a lot of time in the studio, not necessarily painting, but spending a lot of time. I have a lot of journals in here, and this is where I spend time like reading my Bible and praying, and a lot of Casey's in the kitchen. A lot of it has been like, okay, reminding myself of that why and having those reminders all around me. Yeah. Whether they're in visually artful, or if they're just me writing it down and rewriting it down, but like really defining your why.
I think those things can be individual, and you can do that individually, but then you can also have friends that you see only once every 3 months, or it could be a friend that you meet with regularly that can also remind you and ask you, or it's once on the 12th of the month, we always ask each other about the vision and are you still doing whatever that is? I think one of the things for you wanted to be an example for your kids, and for Casey as well. Casey's a musician. And so it's like, if you can do this, what it's so hopeful. And that's a really big kind of, I don't know, instigator isn't really probably the right word, but it's a catalyst for you moving forward, because sometimes people need to see that it was hard for you, but you made it and you did it because of commitment and because you just had faith that you didn't give up. And I feel like you've done really well at being honest about when you were feeling attacked, and when you wanted to just kind of crawl back into safety, and not be challenged, because it is hard. It's not easy. It's not easy to do this. It's not easy to leave a job but just move forward. And I think that I would love you to kind of end it with something on a time. You've changed your body, you've changed your family, you've changed even the space that you live in, and you've created clear boundaries for work and for your family, and all those things add to what you've been called to do, and you've committed time to doing this. Is there anything else that you think if somebody else was wanting, like, just how much has your faith come in when you feel like you're being under attack, or when you want to just kind of slide into, because it's just too hard? What then?
Well, not that I want to hijack what you just asked me and go a different direction, but I really want to take some time and just honor you and how you really have been an answer to that prayer, because it was on November 16th that I prayed and asked God, like, what do I need to have in place? And it was like a week later that I prayed for discernment, and I prayed that God would give me someone who could be on my side and be a voice of encouragement. And then he laid you on my heart. And my whole last year has been one of pivot and change and transformation, and being able to define resistance and how to break through. And so I wrote down what you have been, how God has used you this last year. And I wrote down that Diane has been a fellow pilgrim of faith. I mean, from our first meeting, you were like, we got to read this book, and we're beloved, and we're going to say these things about, the truth of who we are. And you've been a voice of edification.
What's edification?
You're able to build me up through instruction and feedback.
Oh.
So like, you're edifying who I really am. And you love with courageous love. You're a truth speaker. So you speak the truth so that I can see my blind spots, which actually helped me to grow. And you've been a consistent voice of encouragement always since I've known you for the last 23 years, but especially since January. You've helped me to see the promise in me when I couldn't see it. You've helped me to renew my vision and see with faith and not necessarily by sight. So you're constantly helping me to renew that vision. You remind me what my dream is about, that it's about my family and it's about the generations to follow. My breaking points, you've been able to see them, and you are such an amazing guide in saying, okay, well, let's try this week. You never make me feel judged when I've hit that breaking point, or like, oh my gosh, I've totally failed at this didn't work. Like, oh, the next one she allows me to fail. And actually, in regards to the whole dream, you have said, and you continue to say, like, just doing the thing is success. Like, it all could fail, Jodi, but just showing up and doing the thing is success. So let's just embrace the unknown and focus on the next step and take action. And you've helped me to understand that doubt is overcome by action. It's when I don't do the things that I still am carrying unbelief, but when I actually take action. Yeah. You help plan the next moves with me, and you remind me to be kind to myself, which is a priceless gift. And you remind me of how far I've come.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm so
Brian
grateful.
says his allergies are kicking up.
Yeah, mine too.
Mine too. Thank you, Jodi.
Yep.
But you do those things for me too. I'm super thankful.
Yeah, I'm thankful. And that's probably another mindset that has really been ingrained this last year with you, is that being grateful is healing. And I'm really grateful for you. I'm really thankful for you.
There are so many things. If you ever hear me, I make a little beep. That's Jodi. Jodi used to do that, or maybe she still does it. But when we were at work, she would be like, oh, well, and so that's like, I told her, I was like, I adopted that from you because I wanted a piece of her with me. And Jodi, I don't know if you remember this, but this is so old. Do you remember this? You took this.
Yes.
She was at a hotel. I don't remember if this is in Colorado or it was something else, but, you took this picture of this little girl. It was her parents' hotel. Yep. And you took it, and I keep it on my desk. I mean, this is 23 years old.
Yeah.
But I've kept it on my desk ever since. I just love it because it was this just it could be any time. Like the little girl looks like she's just in a little white dress, but she's sleeping with her arms fully out. Like no one can sit on this couch, it's like, and I feel like one of the things I deal with is, am I taking up too much space?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that it's fun to see you thrive and soar, and I can see when you start holding yourself back. And I think that's anybody, it's just about being in relationship with people. And I think being willing to be vulnerable with people, and God puts people in our lives to allow us that, but we have to be vulnerable. You had to be vulnerable enough to say, hey, do you do this? Can I do this with you? Right. Or would you do this with me? But this is, it is definitely, we are I always think of it, we're on a journey together. I just am able to see some things about you, but you're able to see things about me too.
It's, I really feel like being with others is imperative to living out your destiny and your call, that your promise actually equals our promise. And my destiny is tied to your destiny, and how we steward our promises affect each other. So it's imperative. Like we can't do it on our own. And you are so skilled at being that person that allows someone who is like, I'm in a studio by myself every day, but you create space for me to not be alone in that journey and to be someone that travels alongside.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's, I don't have a million people that I, whatever God calls me, but if he calls me to help 100 people, or if he calls me, it's not about a number for me. So, but I love that I'm been able to just walk with you on this, Jodi. I want to make sure that people know how to get in touch with you, and so that they can walk on this journey with you as well, because you're documenting this on Instagram. And so on Instagram, it's Jodi, Jodi Miller _ and then art. And all of these are in the chat below. And then her main Instagram is Darling Bird Studios on Instagram. And then the if somebody was interested in doing the same kind of health assessment, or doing something that you had done, maybe they have back pain or they have some other kind of pain that they want to just look at. This wasn't like a 2-week and done kind of thing. This has been over from March to 6 months.
Yeah.
I'm really bad at math, but I think it's about 6 months. But you started seeing and feeling change within
a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that it's called Optavia, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's Optavia, and you fill out the health assessment. And then I have Jamie and Kim here locally that I refer people to, and they are amazing. Yeah. And then they kind of, they do it in community. They become your like health coach and give you encouragement, check in every week. And it's really good.
So if you want, you probably would be happy to answer a DM at either one of your Instagrams, right? For people.
Yes.
But the Optavia, if somebody's interested in that, that's just form.jotform.com, and then a whole bunch of numbers that I'm not going to read off to you, but they are down below. So if you're interested in it. But 40 pounds is a lot. Jodi is not like 6'4", so she's taller than me. But she's like, I haven't worn these since I was in college or something, like some pants or whatever. And I just think that, so you just feel you have a ton more energy, and I always think you look beautiful no matter what. But I know that you feel better, and it's a really big that your back isn't bothering you.
Wow, so huge.
Jodi, I know we didn't get to answer everything, but thank you for being willing to share things with everybody, and just
of course
leaning in. I think one thing I've tried to do, and you do for me as well, is just, and Mario does it as well, is lean in and who God calls us to be. And he has told me many times, Diane, you weren't called to be successful. You were called to be obedient. So if he's called you to do this, then go at it. And I know I've said those same words to you because they were so impactful to me. And I just think that, understanding your purpose and what you are called to do, and when you are in discomfort or uncomfortable situations, it's good to be willing to address those and try different things. And they might not always work, but at least you're trying something new. And I think that there could be success and just celebration in that. So, Jodi, thank you so much. I love you and I appreciate you. And thank you for being on Design Recharge again.
It was great. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm going to hit stop and we'll see you guys next week. Hopefully, if you're interested, either it'll be me alone or it'll be me and Mario, and we'll do like a rapid fire mindset things. So if you are struggling with something and you want to put it out in front, and you want someone to kind of help you understand why you're having struggle with something or you're being challenged by something, I will send out an email and just say, hey, I want to pop on, and then we'll just get an order. And if nobody does, I guess I'll just ask Mario a whole bunch of questions, or I'll be doing it alone. So hopefully I won't be alone but please, this is a time for us to be in community together. So I am very thankful, and I'm thankful for all y'all, and thanks for staying so long. All right, I'm going to hit stop now.